Started. Hi, everyone. I'm Chantal, Director of Membership Services at St. Joseph Media. It's great to have you all here this morning. TL.talent offers innovative workshops about entrepreneurship, marketing, business development, and more, led by leading executives and city builders in Toronto. We're happy to have you all here for a second virtual TL.talent workshop of the week. Here are some quick housekeeping rules. Please make sure to keep your mics and cam turned off until the end of the event for the Q&A session. We encourage you to ask any questions you may have throughout the class in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. I'd like to introduce Marie Chevrier, CEO and founder of Sampler, the leading platform helping brands like L'Oreal and Nestle deliver samples online and gather the insight they need to build one-on-one relationships with their customers. Sampler has reached over 50 million consumers globally in 24 different countries, and its most notable clients include CPG industry giants Unilever, Pepsi, and Henkel. Marie is also a dedicated advisor to technology and CPG startups, including Scout Canning, member of the Retail Tomorrow Advisory Board, and co-founder of Retail TO, a community dedicated to growing and strengthening Toronto's retail ecosystem. Here is a link to Toronto Life's Beauty Box that we just launched with Sampler last month. Please make sure to check it out and sign up to get free samples sent directly to your home. So today, she will lead a workshop focusing on taking the leap into entrepreneurship. Thank you so much for your time today, Marie. Take it away.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. This is so awesome. I'm so glad that Toronto Life is putting together these talks. It's so amazing to connect and to hopefully share some best practices. I've certainly learned a lot from the other talks, so hopefully I can be as helpful as possible. I'm hearing from some of the chat comments so far. Some of you are just thinking of getting into entrepreneurship. Other ones are potentially already in there, but potentially looking for the next step. So what I wanted to do is maybe just kind of give you some guiding thoughts about my early stage entrepreneurial journey, and then ultimately maybe share a couple stories that will help you put that advice into context. And I'll also share during this call a lot of resources. I think Toronto is actually probably the best place I believe, I'm biased, but I think it is, at least in North America, if not the world, the best place to start a company right now. So many different resources for us. So I'll share a couple, but please prepare your questions. This is really meant to be as useful as possible for you. So if you think I'm not going deep into something enough, please add your questions. We could go to it at the end of the session. So the first piece of advice, the first thing I would say is don't. I think the first line would be go for it, and stop thinking about what if I'm not good enough? What if my idea is not good enough? What if I don't have these resources? The first step to getting into entrepreneurship is going for it and just putting yourself, making that commitment to yourself that you're just going to head into entrepreneurship and take that first step forward. I'll tell you from my own experience, the moment you put that kind of mindset of I will become an entrepreneur, I will start my company, the world really just starts working in super magical ways. And it's all driven by this initial, mindset of I'm doing this. So go for it. I think a story that really that kind of crystallizes when I decided to go for it was one day, this would now be like, I guess it would be like nearly 9 years ago. I Google searched the word entrepreneur. Like I literally searched the word and I said, what does it mean? Like, I really wanted to understand what I needed to do in order to become an entrepreneur. And that might sound like a really silly question, but it's not. Like, is there traits of an entrepreneur that would make me feel more comfortable in taking the leap, or what are the first few steps? So in my search, I ended up finding, and this is a story just to inspire you on just the fact that when you put your mindset to it, things get very magical. I ended up finding a guy called Guillaume, And he was the leader of an entrepreneurship society out in Montreal. And I decided to reach out to Guillaume. And that entire day, I spent hours, researching entrepreneurship, but I only reached out to one person. And I reached out to him and I said, could we please go for a coffee? A few weeks went by and he didn't answer. So I thought, he wasn't interested in helping me out. And he finally answered and we went out for a coffee. And Guillaume had just become the managing director of Rocket Internet, which is a really, really big venture capital firm from Europe. He was basically bringing them to North America, specifically to Canada. And he literally, within 15 minutes of the coffee, just said, you know what, I'm going to give you a shot and I'm going to make you the CMO of a new startup that we're launching here. But what you have to do is you have to move to Toronto. At the time I had been living in Montreal. So that was my first kind of crystallizing moment of, when I put my mindset, I told myself that I would do this. I reached out to somebody, he offered me an opportunity, and I got into my car and I moved 2 weeks later to Toronto. Believe it or not, from that moment on, so many other things became available to me because I was available, because I was making myself available, because I was going for it, because I was dedicated to being an entrepreneur. And within about less than a month, my role in Toronto got promoted to an entrepreneur in residence in New York. And I actually got to become the co-founder instead of becoming just the CMO. I became the co-founder of my first startup, which was called Drop Gifts, which was a gift card company. And just, again, took the risks, went to New York, moved into an apartment in Harlem with someone I barely knew, and just took the leap, and I did it. And I learned so much during the first startup that I built. And, magical things did happen. I ended up meeting my husband who, I wouldn't have met. He's in New York. And so it's not just things that are professional. It's also in your personal life. All these things will kind of come together. But all of this started from that day that I made this, declaration to myself that I was going to become an entrepreneur and that I was going to take the leap and that I would go for it and take all opportunities that came to me. So that's number one, go for it. Number two is you will figure out every little step. I'll tell you still to this day, a lot of people tell me, Marie, what has been the hardest step about being an entrepreneur? And I'll tell you, I think that figuring out how to incorporate my company in the first few weeks of me deciding to get into business was probably the hardest step, because I had no idea what I was doing. Incorporation documents and anything to do with government filing is usually quite complicated, like signing up with the CRA and all that stuff. And it's not obviously we've been through a lot more challenges in my journey, but the fact that it was the first time that I stared at something and said, I am not able to do this. I don't have the capacity or the skills to do this. And that I had to just convince myself in that moment that if I sat down and I really stopped everything else and focused on figuring this out, I could call people, I could call on some help, and I could figure it out. That was the first time that I did it. And I'll tell you, since then, we've had to deal with ridiculously larger things in every single step of the way. You will figure it out. You don't need to know today what will come in 3 years. You don't need to know today what will come in 2 days. You don't need to know everything. You will be able to figure it out. So number two is you'll figure out every little step. Don't be like me. Don't overthink and think about, what's next, what's coming next. Just be ready to take on those challenges and you will figure it out. Number three is don't do this alone. I'm a sole founder. So, I'm saying this in the same breath as don't do this alone. Many of us are lucky enough to have found somebody who is, right time, right place, same mindset, different skill sets, complementary skill set, whether that's, you're technical and you find a co-founder that is better at marketing or at sales. Personally, I didn't have that initial luck. In fact, I did initially start with some co-founders, but unfortunately, very quickly, it kind of unraveled. And when it did, I decided, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this alone as a founder, but not alone as far as my network. So immediately I started, building an amazing team around me. Those could be your teammates, your employees. That's definitely, a great way to start, is making sure that you're finding people that are complementing your weaknesses. So, I'm a great salesperson, not technical. So I needed to find technical teammates. I might be, I'm not really organized to the level I would like on the finance side. So I needed to get some help on finance. These could be employees. These could be advisors. You need to be surrounding yourself with those resources right from the beginning, so that you don't feel alone, and so that you aren't left alone to figure all of these things out. The good news is as I said, there is a very large list of resources in Toronto for companies, no matter what your stage is. So I'm going to copy paste this into, hopefully, copy paste into this chat. But ultimately, I'll walk you through a couple of them. Oh, actually, I don't know if it's working. I'll do that right after. But ultimately, I'll copy paste a list of local resources depending on which stage you're in. Chantal, maybe what I'll do is I'll just share you on this. Actually, I'll just keep going. So the first one that I'll chat to, and some of you might be familiar with it, is called Mars Discovery District. Mars Discovery District is a free advisory program. It's something that allows you you could go to their website, you can find a ton of resources. It could be as simple as things like, template employment agreements, template shareholder agreements, things like that. But they also have full-time staff across pretty much every category of business to help you as advisors. The Tech Toronto community, if you are going into tech, there's that. There's also accelerators. So for example, if you're pre-idea or at the idea stage, there is Next Canada, and the Accelerator Center in Waterloo. If you're at the MVP stage, there's Startup Boost, the DMZ for early market traction. So I'll copy paste all of these. But the idea here is we are very, very lucky to have all of these different resources available to us, and we should absolutely be using them. This is not only so that you can find advisors and investors, it's also so that you can find friends and new and other founders who are going to be your friends throughout this entire journey. I have a friend of mine, Sean, who I met in a pre-accelerator, and I'll tell you, we're still, we're 6 years later, and we are still, each other's buddies, going through the exact same stages of our business at the same time. So I'm sending it to you, Chantal, so that you could copy paste it. So the third, that one was don't do this alone. So the third kind of point is don't do this alone. The fourth one is really being yourself, right? So a lot of people ask me, like, Marie, what's your best leadership advice? And throughout this entire journey, I have found that staying authentic to who I am as a person has been the best guiding light or in guiding principle in how I conduct myself in business internally and externally. So, one story I'd say is like, you have to find strength in your weaknesses. So one thing that, any one of my friends would tell you is like, I don't know how to keep a secret. I don't know how to not speak my mind, right? Like, I'm very, very transparent person. And when you start kind of building a team and you get to a point where you're 20 plus people, it's not like the early days where potentially you would have, just like a few people around a table and everyone knows kind of everything. You really have to create like, layers of management, and you have to create like ways of communicating. And it got to me at some point where I started to be like, oh my God, is my transparency a weakness? Is my transparency a weakness? Like, am I a little bit too transparent with my team? And what was really cool is that just about a year ago, we got the entire sampler team to sit around the table and think about the core values of our business and really do like a culture exercise. And the consultant that we were working with was incredible. And she said, although Marie will have like obviously contributed to the culture of sampler, unfortunately, Marie, it's not about you, it's about them today. And she very, very nicely asked me to leave the room. And the team ultimately got to brainstorm, think through who we were as a company, who we wanted to continue to be. And the top voted characteristic ended up being transparency. And as a leader, I don't think I ever had a more like aha moment than to realize that, at the end of the day, I don't know anything else to lean on than to be myself and to lead with my heart. And that ultimately that those values and those things that, I might have seen as weaknesses were actually our company's strengths. And it was just such an incredible thing. So to recap, I guess the fourth one is, be yourself. So those are like super high level, thoughts to get you started. So go for it. You'll figure out every little step, and don't do this alone. And then ultimately just stay yourself, be yourself throughout this journey. Use your guiding principles, your own values as ways to make decisions, and scale that by adding, a team that will also contribute to that. But those would kind of be my first kind of philosophical thoughts on getting started. I'd love to spend a bit more time on the questions if that was helpful as well. I think there's a couple questions.
Yeah, I'll pull them up here.
Perfect.
Okay. So with regards to finding people who can help you, how do you avoid getting Zuckerberged by sharing your idea with people and not having any sort of business programming marketing skills, and therefore risk having them steal the idea and do it themselves?
Okay, so two things. So first off, Chantal, thanks so much for copy pasting those. So definitely look at those resources. If you want to talk to someone who is literally paid to listen to your idea and to give you feedback, Mars Discovery District is a really, really good place. That's like number one, is just kind of leverage those resources. But number two, what I'll say is that there is this kind of like scarediness that we all have around, potentially sharing our ideas. But the idea is really nothing in the composition of what makes a company successful. At the end of the day, the person you're sitting across from needs to be so freaking passionate about that idea that they're going to wake up every morning, like I do and you do probably, at 5 a.m. and work till through the night and actually like not be able to take this idea out of their mind. That's what builds a company. What builds a company is passion. What builds a company is determination. So I'd say the idea, like you could share your idea all you want. That person would literally have to leave that table and go and build it the next day and spend like their life's work on it to compete with your level of passion, right? And so don't be afraid to share, because there is too much to lose in not sharing, and not enough to win in keeping it to yourself. So the like mutual MNDAs, like that time, that these things, like put those aside. Don't worry. You need to take risks, and that means sharing risks and sharing with people. And even today, like Sampler is a really well-established company. We have 300 leading brands, but sometimes I'm talking to really big giants. Like I'm talking to large retailers that have global scale, or I'm talking to large partners that could really make us if they chose to partner, but also potentially start a garage a garage of developers and potentially copy the concept as well. But at the end of the day, I know that they will never be able to catch up to the passion and dedication that our team is to this specific problem, right? And I need to hold on to that.
Amazing. So we have a question from Jason. On the practical side, how much money should I have in the bank before taking the leap with my own business idea? What if I have, well, $0?
Great question. So I probably had minus $0 when I started my company. I think when I started Sampler, I had just left a failed startup. So my first startup was it didn't work out, and I came back from New York and I moved onto my friend's couch. Like I literally asked a friend if she would let me live at her place for 6 months. And I'll say, like, no money is almost like the best boot camp. And like we go through these cycles too. Like it's crazy how a company that is limited resources can achieve. Like you will spend money on things that you don't need. The more money you have, the more money you will spend. We know that in our personal lives. So it's very similar for startups. So I'd say, like, obviously, it can be really difficult to start a technology company, for example, or even a product company without like any money for R&D or without any money for development. But you can really look into options like partnering with a CTO or partnering with a researcher on an equity basis. And that could mean a co-founder agreement, but it doesn't need to. You can bring on someone on equity without them being essentially your co-founder. And a good resource for that would be AngelList and Angel Co. That's angel.co. That's a good place for tech companies, at least, to go and find co-founders. They do you can post a job and you can ultimately find co-founders there. There's a couple others like just search finding a co-founder and you would be able to find people. This is unfortunately a really good time to do that because unfortunately a lot of people are out of work and are out of work not because of choice, or if they are out of work potentially because of choice, they are looking for flexibility. And you know what? When you're a 1 to 3 person startup, you can offer a lot of flexibility. You can, if Johnny wants to work during the night, because during the day he has childcare responsibilities, you can offer that. And that's really, really attractive. So think about bartering potentially equity versus cash.
That's super insightful. Thank you. What are some of the tips to get out of a rut? What if you feel like your business isn't taking off? Are there goals, benchmarks that should happen in the first year to show you're going in the right direction?
Yeah. I think we all get into a rut. I think like there that I think that's actually probably one of the like most common and probably healthiest things that you'll continue to see. Like you always go into cycles. My husband's also an entrepreneur, and like we're typically on a different cycle. So like he'll be like pumped because he just raised capital, and I'll be like down because we just lost this big customer. And it's like this kind of interesting thing, but we always say to each other like, don't forget, like you're on the treadmill, you're on the cycle, right? While today might be really really dark, tomorrow's going to be, there's going to be something, and it might not be tomorrow. Sometimes the rut might be like weeks, but there's always something. And they talk about the entrepreneurial high. The entrepreneurial high is so addictive, but it's so true. And it usually what kind of coins you as an entrepreneur is that the high is so nice that you're willing to go through the steps of the lows. And it's a really like, sounds super unhealthy as I'm saying it, but it's a very, very natural thing. I'd say that a lot of my ruts start when I set the bar a little too high, or when I didn't like prepare every goal into many steps. So one of the solutions might be potentially like, maybe your goal is, I want to get investors into my company. Well, what are the 10 steps, 10 mini steps that I need to do in order to get to that? So I need to create an investor deck. I need to reach out to people within my network that are connected to investors. I need to do research about investors that would be interesting for me. Once you've highlighted all those different steps, if you're like me, you'll be really excited about crossing one of those things off, and that will make you feel accomplished. So maybe just think about, is my goal a little too big right now, and should I break it down?
Right. And you mentioned how your husband's an entrepreneur as well. So do you find that you help support each other? Or are you like competitive and just, trying to compete against each other? Like how's that dynamic?
Yeah. No, I think we're pretty good. I think we definitely help each other more than anything. He's like super, yeah, like he has really good strengths that are like kind of my weaknesses. So we balance each other a lot on that stuff. Yeah, like it's a little crazy. Like we just have rules. Like, we try to have dinner between 7 and 9. And most of the nights it's 10, but like we try and make sure that we have like this kind of like 2 hour slot where we're together. During that time we try not talk about work. So actually, like I'd say while we bounce a lot of ideas, we try and like limit it, because you can very quickly have spent your entire day like thinking about free product samples, and then kind of spend your entire night talking to your husband about free product samples, and then it ends up it ends up taking up a lot of your life, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a balance. It's crazy.
That makes sense. And also working from home, right? So right now, I'm sure it's just a little bit of a different, work environment for both of you.
Yeah, for sure. He's on in the other room, but like I took over his office. He usually works from home, so I took over his office too.
That's amazing. Um,
Yeah.
okay, I have another question here. So, any things you shouldn't do when starting a business?
Ooh, any things you shouldn't do? Um, I Yeah, like I think yeah, oh my God, like that's a hard one. What are the things you shouldn't do? I think like just maybe what I'll say is like don't burn any bridges. Like I think that people forget that, your personal brand is just as important as the company. Like, if you say sampler, I'm sure like a good percentage of people would say Marie right after, and associate my company to me, or associate me to my company. And And that's really important, right? So, you just want to conduct yourself in and outside of your business as like a good human being. And I think like that's obviously all of you are. But just remember that. And you can't take things personally. Like sometimes I get on calls and like, sometimes someone on the call is like let's say I'm on a demo with one of my like with our business development representative, and she's talking to a brand and they just don't get it. They just don't get it. If I'm having a bad day and I'm hearing someone kind of just not love my idea, or our shared idea, like um this concept of digital sampling, it would be really easy for me to be like, well, you don't know, and to get really defensive. And sometimes I have, and sometimes it's just like it gets the best of you. You're having a terrible day and you're like, why don't you get this? This is so simple. But you can't do that, right? So that's just one example, but just remember that you are conducting yourself, not just for yourself, but for your business as well.
Great. So do you recommend getting funding working with family, or does that get too messy?
Hmm. Yeah, like I think I haven't had experience with that, but my husband has, and I think it's worked for a lot of people. But I think that actually, if you one guiding principle is that every single investment, every time you're asking for financing, you should treat the investor that you're asking the money from as family. Like, would you ask your uncle to invest in this company at this valuation for this work plan? If you wouldn't, then maybe it's not that great of an opportunity, and you should rethink about like your plan, right? I think that's a good principle. And so, at the end of the day, I would absolutely, feel comfortable with my family investing, because I feel so confident in what we're building. But I've also, heard horror stories. I think it comes down more to, a clear understanding of the person who's investing needs to know that they're investing at a risk, and that risk needs to be very, very clear. And it's possible that some angel investors or family don't understand that risk. And so you just want to be really clear from the beginning, like, this could be a really big company and I really believe in it and I'm going to put my heart into it and my soul. But it also might be zero. And you have to be comfortable with that kind of risk profile in your investment, or else it doesn't make sense.
Got it. Um, okay, what are some oh, I think we have those ones, Dustin. Where do you see entrepreneurship post COVID-19? Will Toronto still remain a good place to start a business?
Yeah, I think more than ever, to be honest. I think that what COVID-19 will have done, from a workplace, like a work perspective, is it will have shown the entire world that working from home is possible, and that potentially flexibility around your work is something that you strive for. I think a lot of companies will have been amazing to their employees during this time, and a lot of other companies unfortunately will not have been, and will not have adapted as nicely as they should have. And I think it's going to make a lot of people think about, like, is this really what I want? And even for me as a leader, it's helped me realize that, as much as our work means so much to us, we have the ability as a technology company to make it possible for our team that our work life be well suited for our regular life, our personal life, and not the other way around. Like, our work life should adapt to our personal life, and not our personal life to our work life, and that this will have been shown. So I think there's a lot to be said, and I am very generally proud and obviously like I'm not familiar to every single extent, but as it relates to our company and I think to the technology companies that I get the opportunity to collaborate with, I feel like our government has done a really great job on their response, and they've been attentive to some of the updates that different organizations like CVCA and Mars and all of the organizations that I mentioned in the chat, they've been really attentive to the needs, and they've been attentive to how they might adapt their programs. Like the things like there was a lot of talk around the wage subsidy that's been adapted a few times. Like I think Canada has done a really good job, and yeah, I think we'll strive.
I really think so too. I have a question from Asif. What do you enjoy reading? What is the best book you have read lately?
Ooh.
Have you been reading anything lately?
Yeah, so I have a lot. So I'd say I have like a really long library of business books. I try, like my recommendation to you is to try and alternate between fiction and a business book, and probably have both open at the same time, just because it can be a little bit like stressful to open a business book with like 10 different action items on things to do. Recent reads, the hard thing about hard things is a really good one. Early stage, the best read that is a mandatory if you're starting a technology company is the Lean Startup. That's a really, really good one. What else? If you're fundraising, venture deals is a really important one. So those would be kind of like the textbook ones. Yeah, there's so many. Another really good book around customer success called Customer Success, which I think was really good. I'm just looking at my library as we're talking. But yeah, so I think those are the one. Crossing the Chasm is a really big one if you're kind of in between, like you're in growth stage and you're trying to get to kind of your Series A. They call that Crossing the Chasm. And then my favorite book of all time, which is more for marketers, is Purple Cow by Seth Godin. And it's a really easy read, super small book. But it's all about standing out in the crowd. So if you're currently at that time where you're trying to build like something very special, you're trying to build branding, you're trying to build a unique culture, Purple Cow is a really good one.
Okay, great. Maybe we'll share some of these recommendations after the call too. I'm sure you have a great list that you'd like to share with everybody. Okay, so we have, I think, one question from Joseph. What sort of relationships do you recommend business owners have with their competitors? Are there benefits from keeping a close eye on the competition?
Yeah, that's a really interesting topic. To be honest, for me, my philosophy has always been to just keep a straight like line of sight forward, and to sometimes look left and right, especially in aspects of like how you may compare in a sales conversation, for example, but you have to follow your instincts. And I find that when you are looking left and right at your competitors, you can find yourself getting inspired by some things that shouldn't be your focus, right? So if you're trying to build the largest candy store, and your goal is just to be the largest candy store in the world, and a small candy store shows up and just has this really, really great new front door design, you have to ask yourself like, oh, that's cool. Like, could it get you to a point where you're just like getting obsessed and you're looking for a better front door design, when really what you're trying to do is get big and be the largest candy store? Like, that is a terrible analogy, but the idea is like, don't let your competitors distract you. So we do it. We do about an annual like competitive review, for sure, where we look at things like pricing, where we look at, making sure that we're like we are like still well positioned, but and we're aware of what's going on, but I'm not changing my product roadmap because of a competitor's product roadmap. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I'm sure you get inspired by some of your competitors anyways, right? It just pushes you to get
Yeah.
better almost, right?
Yeah, and we're in communication with them, right? Like I think like all together, you and your competitors are doing the hard job of driving awareness to your category. Like for us, product sampling, in the digital world it was a mission. It's a mission to tell brands, stop handing out free samples on street corners and in grocery stores. Like, do it digitally. It makes more sense. You can target people. You can measure the impact. And then like something like this hits, and that's obviously drives a ton of awareness to what we do, because we do contactless sampling, right? So we're sampling directly to a consumer's home, so the consumer doesn't need to take the product on a napkin at a grocery store, and it just skyrocketed our relevance, right? And I am not just happy for Sampler, I'm so happy for everyone else in this space that got that opportunity. And when this happened, I've had conversations with a few of our competitors, and everyone's kind of sharing their best practices, and who knows, like one day there might be areas of collaboration. So you don't want to burn bridges there either, right?
Oh, that's so true. I have a question for Mia. How long did it take for you to build Sampler from just an idea to where it is now? How long
Yeah,
did
so
it take? I'll ask you the other
yeah,
question
yeah.
after. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was going to say it takes a long time, right? Sampler's been around for 6 years. Today we're approximately 25 employees. We work with 300 brands, and we're kind of at that Series A stage at this point. So we are looking into further areas of expansion, and it's super exciting to think about like global markets and all that stuff. But it took 6 years to get there, right? So it takes a long time. It takes a long time.
Oh, for sure. She had a few other questions. So how long did it take for you to be able to support yourself with Sampler as a full-time job?
Yeah, great question, Mia. So when I started Sampler, I decided that I was going to do Sampler and a consultancy. So I was entrepreneur, like I was like full-time working for myself, but I was freelancing, things like social media management and, community management, influencer management, like design, things like that. So I was kind of using my skill set part-time on a consultant basis, and then also full-time on Sampler, but not getting paid from Sampler, right? So I had to still, make a specific, like a bit of money from my consultancy side. But, and so I did that from the beginning. So think about that. If you can find yourself consulting area that is similar to the startup you're building, you will be in this amazing customer discovery loop. Because for me, I was actually working with brand managers. So I could jump on a call and talk to them about the newsletter I was building for them. But I could also be like, hey, could you take a look at that screenshot of like how I'm thinking this application could work? And I was in this amazing feedback loop where I was able to get continuous feedback from who would eventually be my target market. And guess what? Once I was ready to launch Sampler, I was actually able to ask them to buy the technology, and many of them were my first customers. So right away, but I was consulting.
Wow. Okay. And I think she had another question here. Okay. So she said, asking for people like me who need my actual full-time job to pay the bills and can't dedicate entire days to building a company that may or may not generate income.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. It's tough. And yeah, look if you can potentially like go to consulting basis. Maybe even your current employer would be open to you having less hours.
Yeah. I think we are good with questions here. Does anyone else have any other questions?
I think there's one about
How long did it
meditation.
take? Is there one about meditation? Oh, yeah, that's the last one. I noticed that you teach meditation. Can you talk a little about that and how you gain interest and how and when do you meditate?
Yeah, good observation. So I'll say over the last few weeks, I haven't been keeping my meditation practice as well as I wish. It's something I definitely want to get back to. But I have found, as someone who's like incredibly hyperactive and like ultimately always energized, I did find that it was really hard for me to wind down at the end of the day. And so I fell in love with meditation, especially I really enjoyed going into studios. So I practiced at home and yeah, just like downtown. And it's right across from my work. So I would love just leaving, the day 6, 7, um, and going and meditating and like transitioning into my evening and really just kind of separating that. Um, and I never thought that I could meditate. And I really, if you're thinking about meditation, I suggest the book called um, A Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. It's actually a really good book that kind of outlines like, the easy steps for someone who is fidgety like me. And anyways, so that's how I introduced it, and I absolutely fell in love with it. But being an entrepreneur, being such a driven person, I wanted to find like that discipline, and I couldn't find it in any other way than to participate in a teacher training. So a little bit intense, but after about 2 years of practicing, I decided, let's take this to the next step. So I did 100-hour teacher training. It was over the course of 6 weeks on weekends. And it just like introduced me to all of the background and the science and all that stuff. And it was just so awesome. And I think if you're someone who needs kind of that kick, like that kickstart, that's something I would highly suggest. You can take a teacher training without the intent of teaching, right? So I have taught a few classes, but I didn't do it for teaching. I did it for my own discipline.
And do you find it harder to do it at home versus going to the studio they used to go to? Yeah.
So hard, so hard. Yeah. And that's like a personal thing, because my teacher, she does the Instagram lives, right? And she does the meditation, and still I can't concentrate on Instagram, but I try. And by the way, Sampler does meditation for free on our Instagram every 2 weeks. So you can actually just register and go and get meditation there as well. So yeah, it's tough, but I definitely do like highly suggest that you find your sport or your activity, whether that's painting, whatever it is, you need something to help you disconnect.
Oh, for sure. I think that's it for questions. Thank you so much, Marie. This was super great. This was so insightful. I really hope that everyone really enjoyed our other TL Talent class today. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out. Let us know if you need any additional information. We're happy to share anything from Marie as well. So thank you so much, everybody, and please enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.